himself, gonna be eating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it
win anything. Sam, defend your team, because they haven't won.
Big opportunity for Centrals.
Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Press 4 to Defuse. I'm back from the ocean. I'm back here on the stage to host and talk to these wonderful people about your Valorant esports news and discussion. We got Sam. We got Ryan. It's the usual suspects. How are you two doing today? How are you feeling, Sam?
Feeling pretty good. I had an oddly productive day where I actually left my house and went and did stuff. So I'm exhausted, but it feels good.
That is encouraging. Generally speaking, we're getting back to a time where we can all leave our houses and do stuff. At least here in the U.S., things are opening up in a big way. Ryan, how are you feeling?
Yeah, doing good. I'm surprised you weren't marooned on a small island. Whereabouts did you sail to? Were you like in the Atlantic or?
I sailed from Annapolis, Maryland, down the Chesapeake Bay, and then up through the Atlantic to Newport, Rhode Island. So, yeah, off the
I don't know where any of
East
those
Coast of the
places
US.
are.
In the Atlantic. In the Atlantic. You know where New York City is?
Man.
Yeah.
I sailed past that.
Okay.
Yeah, in the ocean. So that's about where I was. Speaking of where we are, a lot of rosters are trying to figure out where they are, and we've got a ton of roster discussion to talk about. We got roster discussion. We got some fat bands that just dropped that we're going to talk about. We got some tournaments that happened. There's a lot going on here, folks, so let's go ahead and dive on into the action. We're going to be breaking down that roster moves in a segment we like to call Run It Back, where we talk about last week's news and weigh in a little bit on what's going on, opine, if you will. So we got our first topics coming through here, and the first one is a big one. Daps has decided to retire from Valorant competition and has decided to step away from competing altogether. He will be moving away from the game, is inactive for NRG now, leaving them once again searching for a new player, and this is a pretty huge change coming through here. What do we make of it, Ryan?
I'm pretty happy with it. Usually we sort of lament NRG for constantly making roster changes, but I think this is one considering some of the ways that some of the things that Daps has said, even when leaving, he was like, I don't really like this game. I don't know why I was here. And then complained about how easy it was sort of around first strike. It was a weird one. The problem now is filling in the IGL spot, and Daps had a huge amount of experience and coaching ability as well, being a coach and then coming in to be a player again. I'm sure that was useful, and that could be a bit of a detriment to NRG going forward.
Sam, what do you make of it?
I am concerned in a very general sense for NRG because they have these kind of up and down moments, and they started to look good, then they kind of petered off, and we've kind of always had really big expectations for them, but they've never quite managed to hit that mark. Now losing Daps and obviously the IGL in that, it's great for him to be getting out and potentially, I don't know, going to do stuff he actually enjoys. Cool. But for the team itself, that is always a little bit concerning. My question, my hope, my dream, the thing that's probably never going to happen, we did to NRG? Question mark.
It could be possible. They clearly have a goal in leadership here. I will say, though, if your heart's not in it, IGLing is a really hard thing to do because that's one of the roles in tactical FPS that requires the most time spent in game, the most time figuring out new setups, new lineups for your players to exploit, more things to go through. Obviously, having a coach helps with that, but I don't think they have a coach at the moment after Chet left and is headed over to TSM. So it would have required a lot of hours, and it seems like Daps has discovered that after half a year playing this game, almost a year playing this game, it just wasn't the thing for him. Now, I do have a little bit of secret rumors, maybe. This is completely unconfirmed, but I believe Daps might be headed back to Counter-Strike in a coaching capacity for a certain team he was once a part of. Keep an eye out for that one, folks, if it does come true. Still, it might be interesting to see him transition back. Yep.
NRG do have a coach. It's Josh RT.
Oh, that's right.
Oh.
I completely forgot that Josh RT had been signed over there.
I forgot about it as well. I had to double check. But yeah, so they do have a coach, but I think it's fair to say that Josh doesn't nearly have the experience that Chet and even Daps had, right? So
actually,
I think
in terms of pure years, I think he outpaced Chet a lot. Josh Art's been around
Oh,
the game
really?
for a long, long time. Yeah, Chet
I think the
has
cool.
been around for a few. Well, when did Chet start as I'm a Pet? It may have been like 5 or 6 years now at this point. But Josh Art's been around the game for a very long time back in Counter Strike. So in terms of
Yeah.
pure year and some of the level that he's played at, yes, he did have the XP. Recent competitive level though didn't compare to these two guys at all.
I mean, when it comes to having a member of staff to pick out a potential diamond in the rough, especially for IGLs, because there's quite a few. Josh Art's done that a number of times in Valorant already, just finding players that nobody heard about that came out to be pretty good stars. So I hope that we don't just get like a big name come into NRG with big money. I hope that they can find an up and coming IGL that can do quite a lot of work. But yeah, we'll see.
It'd be really interesting to see who goes through. And speaking of IGLs who've just been signed to rosters, there's one out of the pool. This is our next topic to talk about. It's Def joining XSET. He was an IGL who's been sort of out in the water for a long time since Dignitas shut their doors. And was kind of wondering where that was going to go. But now in the big roster shuffle, it's XSET picking him up to bring a little bit more experience to the roster. And I personally love this pickup. This is a very talented XSET team. Even in his introduction, Def was talking about how versatile this team is, how much damage they can do, how fearlessly they play the game, and now bringing more experience, more veteran experience into the IGLing role. I think this one's going to be really exciting. What do you make of it, Sam?
I just wonder about the role switch ups that might need to happen because Def played the Omen, if I'm not wrong.
I think you're correct.
I believe so, yeah. He was the Omen player. And obviously Weeded was a Viper? So, I would assume there's going to be a little bit of a shuffle there. I don't imagine that it's too much of an issue. I think most of these guys by now have become quite versatile in whatever agent they want to be. Mike. I think all of them are quite versatile, so it shouldn't be the biggest issue in the world. But it is something that I'm curious about, and I'm looking forward to seeing what those potential switch-ups might be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Do you think these roles are going to work, or do you think we might run into some conflict here, Ryan?
I think it should work. So who did they lost Weeded, who was sort of on those kind of roles, and from the sounds of it as well, Def said in interviews that like he'd played the Sentinel role and isn't looking to change up that at all. He just wants to up his agent pool, which most likely means he's going to be playing a lot more Viper at this point. But it obviously depends on patch notes. There's been rumors that episode 3 is going to have a lot in it, so there might not be any point in scrimming Viper because she might just get nerfed to the ground at this point. So I think it's a really good pickup, and seeing more Brits succeeding in North America is a nice thing because Def's been there for quite some time.
He has, yeah.
You were going to say that he's not a Brit anymore
not
because
anymore.
he's been there for so long.
We've adopted him. He's been in the U.S. for a long time. He's engaged, married, significantly committed to an American. He's been here. He's been here. He's sticking around. I think we get to claim him at this point. Reverse colonization, you know. Yeah, take him.
I'm not sure
take
that's how that
Shaw.
works,
Take Def.
but
I
okay.
think that's how that works. I think that's how that works. But yeah, he's been competing for a while, and I do expect to see some versatility come in. Speaking of the patch notes, I mean, obviously that's going to be probably next week's show. But did you see the teaser tweet from a member of Riot's social team where it's just a giant tome and it has patch notes like 3 point whatever on it?
Yes.
I very much enjoyed that hint. We're going to be getting oodles of changes to the game, so it should be very fresh. On to the next roster move. Renegades are bringing in Jerk. They're feeling rather rude. They're bringing in a Jerk to help them on out. I will be honest, I am not super familiar with Jerk. This is kind of a shakeup to me. They're already competing with it, though, so it's pretty exciting here. What do we make of this, Ryan? Oh, Sam.
He was playing with them for quite some time. That's the only thing is like he's played a couple of the qualifiers with them. Or was that super recently? It was June, so yeah. He was on Resonate or Reformed was the team that he was on, but other than that, never heard of him up until now.
Sam, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I thought that I'd seen him on another roster that I was familiar with, but I just double checked and nah. I have no idea who this player is. But what I will say is it's really, really awesome to see newer blood come in and get an opportunity. I think that we very often at the like higher levels we have this mentality of like recycling the older players because you know they're seasoned, they're veterans, and that kind of comes with it this idea of well clearly they're the best or whatever. So it's really nice to see some newer players getting opportunities, whether that's to trial or to actually be a part of the team. It's really cool, and I hope this guy pops off.
Yeah,
He
we'll have
plays
to
a lot
see
of
about it.
Rays apparently.
That'll-
That's the only thing to add is he plays a lot of Rays, so that's probably what he's going to be playing here.
I would assume so. I do generally have a fair amount of respect for Roy in terms of in-game opinions and sort of opinions on players as well. Obviously, the in-game leader there for Renegade. So if they're picking him up, I'm intrigued. It's we'll take a look at it. They obviously just did well in one of the Nerd Street weeklies, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show.
Another one, yeah.
So good result early on with a new player on the roster. Moving on in. Coolest announcement video ever. We've got a new female team competing in the US in Valorant. It's the Shopify Rebellion, which is really interesting. Shopify have an esports team. The only thing they've had signed before this were like 3 StarCraft pros and a Rocket League team. So now they've got a Valorant squad and they've got sick videos for it. I mean, I'm pretty excited about this one. What do we make of this squad here, Sam?
Well, okay, this isn't a new squad. They're just obviously newly picked up. This is the old Moon Raccoons Black with Lelicious as coach. So that's really exciting. They actually, a while back, Moon Raccoons had tweeted out saying, thank you, ladies, and, good luck with your future, whatever. There were all of these, like, teaser tweets, and all the players were, like, teasing, saying, oh, we can't wait to announce, and it's been weeks. So it's nice to see that it's finally happening. Like you mentioned, an interesting org. I was like going through their Twitter and just seeing like DreamHack StarCraft stuff for like the last month or something ridiculous. But I'm excited to see. I mean, this isn't, like I said, it's not a new roster. These ladies have been around. They've had some really good results, but it's nice always to have that extra little bit of backing. And of course, new orgs in the scene can't be a bad thing. So looking forward to it.
They've also been competing under one of my favorite mix names ever, which was Built Butter.
Yep.
Enjoyed Built Butter quite a bit, just seeing that pop up in tourney rosters. What do we make of it, Ryan?
Yeah, I got to cast these guys a little bit in the first Game Changers event. I remember Flowerful just getting a really cheeky, like, lockdown play that stopped a Defuse coming in. I mean, Raccoons should be happy that they've been able to get at least one of their teams signed at this point, but it was a solid team. And I think going into Game Changers for the next couple of weeks and stuff there's some genuine hot contenders. And it's nice to see less unsigned dogs played in where you're not sure where to gauge them, and actually seeing these not only tier 1 dogs, but brand new orgs coming into the scene. And, Girls Got Game, I think, is playing in this tournament up and coming as well, which is like a big CS team, right? So I don't think it's just going to be a case of Cloud9 White winning this one. There's a lot of competition, and I think Shopify Rebellion is a team to beat those top 4.
It's going to be really interesting to see. Also, just before we move on, I want to say whoever made this video, you're awesome.
Hell yeah.
Give them work, because this video is sick. One of the best announcement videos I've ever seen. Moving on in, changing regions here. We had some big news coming out of the Korean region, which is that Glow is coming on back to Vision Strikers, this time as a coach. This is the move that kind of, I want to say a lot of people saw coming. It made a lot of sense. He said he was stepping down from competition, but still wanted to be involved in esports. It's like, well, all that experience, how do you build a young roster? You move that guy into the coaching role. This kind of made a lot of sense here, Ryan. What do we make of it?
Yeah, I think that this is like a big step into the golden age, I think, of Korea. We had them do relatively well at Reykjavik. There was still a little bit of disappointment around them playing overall with New Turn and Vision Strikers not getting there. I'm talking about the region specifically and not just Vision Strikers. So seeing Glow move into that coaching role to give that fundamental insight to playing tac shooters in a region that goes really hard on esports, but not specifically into tac shooters, and then maybe seeing Solo do that for New Turn, that would potentially do wonders for the scene. The weird thing is, though, is right now it looks like on VLR.gg that it's a 6-player roster now for Vision Strikers. They brought in Buzz and Maka. So I don't really know how they're going to go about this, but I'm probably going to pay more attention to Korea for Stage 3 than I did for Stage 1 and 2, because it's a region I think surprised everybody when it comes to expectations. And I think Vision Strikers are going to take the fact they didn't get to go to Iceland very personally. So yeah, they're gonna be hot shit, so to speak.
I love it. Hot shit. You think so, Sam?
Honestly, I don't have too much to add to all of that. Like we said, this was pretty much expected from Glow. In terms of the 6-man roster, we have seen some teams do that. They generally tend to have like a specialist that will come out on a particular map or something, to that regard. Maybe like if you have somebody who's really good at Viper and then you only bring them out for like Bind and Icebox, and then on the other maps you have someone else, as an example. So I think the 6-man rosters can work, but I think just being a flexible player works better in a general sense. I'm not going to judge it, though. I will wait and see how the results pan out.
All right, I'm going to fly us through some of these remaining roster moves so we can get into some of the meaty EU ones because they're towards the tail end of our outline here. Koala Noob is trialing for Ghost. Talented young player, competed with some big frames rosters, competed here and there, finally picked up to a team. I think that if he actually does get signed at the end of this trial, he's apparently going to drop the Noob moniker and just go to Koala or potentially Koala Pro. That's what I'm hearing. But this is exciting. He's a talented young player. We've seen it before. Had a nice result already in one of the Nerd Street Weeklies, so that is exciting to see. We'll have to see how Koala Noob does down the stretch. Hwin is a free agent. He's off of Gen G now. His contract has expired or he's been released. I'm not sure exactly what the terms are from it, but Hwin is now completely available. No buyout whatsoever. If you want to sign him, pick him up. This one's interesting. We knew he was off the roster. He's been off the roster for a little while. Very reliable, very dependable player. A guy I've never heard anything but good things about from his former teammates. So I'd expect him to find a place, especially with one of like the younger teams that's looking to make a move up to the next level. That would be a fantastic place for Hwin to go just with that experience. Any quick comments on that one before we just slide on?
Win to NRG, question mark?
You know?
Like Trex and Hwin on the roster, like...
Yeah. So kind of interesting.
I mean, they could just all play Jet. No hero limits. Just
Everyone's
3
Jet.
Jets on the team.
Escalation.
It's all escalation.
Spike
Everyone's
Crush. It might
Jet.
come in handy for future tournaments as we'll go over.
Dash, dash, dash. Knives.
Replication, yeah.
All right, time to hop over to EU. Time to hop on into Europe. Draken is out of Guild. This one was a little bit of a surprise, making his way out as Guild looks to rebuild for the next stage of the VCT. What do we make of this one, Ryan?
So I'm happy with this for similar reasons to Daps. I think Draken was a big name that came into this roster. I feel it was just the name that really came with it because he joined Bonk before they became Guild. And sort of looking back, I kind of feel like having a big tenured Counter-Strike pro on your team like that is going to do wonders for a new org that's going to move into the scene with Guild, right? So maybe they think that they don't need Draken on that roster anymore. It seems that Yassine is a great poster boy for this team overall. But he was just super inconsistent. It seemed that he wanted to play Jet to begin with, but it didn't quite work out, and then was playing Omen. And just frankly, there's better Omens and better overall high map or agent pool players in Europe that Draken just kind of got drowned out, especially with Swedish players as well, with teams like HSD and Hong Kong disbanding at the same time. It's just unfortunate, but I don't know where he's going to go from here.
Sam, what do you make of it?
I think that finding something that you are particularly good at, obviously we talk about being flexible as being really, really important, but if you haven't reached that point yet where you can be flexible on so many different agents, rather be really good at one or two than be mediocre at best at a bunch of them. And I think that for Draken, maybe right now, his biggest thing is to just find his identity as a player and then move forward from there. You'll probably find that the team gave him a lot of opportunities. They were like, all right, well, this isn't working. Why don't you try this? All right, well, why don't you try this? And when it's like still didn't work, it was like, all right, man, something's got to give. So I think it's really sad because I really liked Draken. But this is probably the best thing for him going forward, for him to have that chance to just figure out what his direction is going to be and then find a team that he slots in with.
Now, I will say, just based on his response to being cut, some of the messages he posted, that was one of the most positive responses to being let go by a team I've ever seen. So clearly he was pretty happy with his time at Guild. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up next, but clearly a very positive dude in general, at least in terms of that comms. The next one, XMS, is done with the Alliance trial, and now this one's interesting. I'm going to talk about the phrasing here in this tweet, but I think this bears reading. He said specifically, my trial ended with Alliance, and I decided not to continue with the boys. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that's a lie. Press X to doubt. I don't know that a player's ever done a trial with a top-tier org, and then they've said, we're going to offer you the contract that you want, and they say, you know what? I can do better. It just doesn't really happen there, especially if you're going through the trouble of trialing. So I suspect Alliance chose not to pick him up at the end of that trial. But either way, it means that XMS is out of Alliance, and they're looking for a new player. What do we think about that, Sam?
First of all, I think there is a world where that happens, where like maybe you trial and you realize you just don't gel with this team. As much as you want to be on that paid salary, do you want to deal with these people while you're having that salary? But that being said, I think I agree with you. I don't know. you know what? If Alliance feels like this is the way that needs to go, and again, assuming that it was Alliance that made the decision, then they clearly have a reason for that. I mean, I had many doubts about Alliance when they first announced their roster right at the start. I was like, and they started getting results that I did not expect. So I've learnt my lesson. I'm not going to question the decisions that Bank and Mitch make. If they felt like this was the right thing to do, then I'm just looking forward to seeing who they do pick up and what that player is going to bring to the table.
The superior esports banks. What do we think about their decisions here, Ryan?
I mean, they probably didn't want to work with Mitch, to be honest, and I absolutely do not blame them. So that's probably... I don't know. Like, it was
Shots
pretty
fired.
forgettable. XMS on this roster is pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't remember any standout moments from him overall. And much like the Draken Point, considering they play the same agents, there's just so many good Omen control players. And with Viper becoming more of a part of the game, if you can just play Brimstone and Omen like XMS is put in there, and you can't play Astra and you can't play Viper, you are going to get left behind very quickly. And like I said, there's just so many up-and-coming talented players that are so good at playing anything at this point that you can push them into a certain role and they can excel at it.
All right, well, moving on to some other orgs that have been making changes here. We now have the full OG roster. They put out an announcement today, shortly before our show, which is great. Thank you for doing that, by the way, OG. Usually they do it an hour after our show, and that is really annoying. So thanks for the roster announcement before our show goes live. We've got the roster here. Let's break it down. I actually can't read. My eyes are a little small. Okay, there we go. It's up big. We've got Vic, Unco, DPS, Destrian, and Trex coming through. Destrian and Trex coming from Honk, right? What do we make of this roster, Ryan?
It's still a rough run for OG. I think Tavik and Unco were the better backbone of this squad. Destrian and Trex. Destrian especially is probably the more underrated player on this roster. A very good Astra, a very good IGL, and I think could do a lot with just being the supportive anchor player of this team. DPS has probably been in the news for the wrong reasons in his Valorant career so far. However, it's been a while since First Strike, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt to see that he's changed. But it's also like the playing. I don't know how good he is because I haven't seen him playing God knows how long. So I'm looking forward to this. But big shout out to Tanny, another guy that lives in Britain. He literally lives like 10 minutes away from me. So yeah, I'm super happy to see OG pick up a team, but still the whole fizzy stuff from before kind of echoes a bit of a sour taste. And yeah, OG haven't impressed in Valorant so far, not only when it comes to their performances, but just the shit that they've done. So it's tough. I hope they can do it a little bit better, though.
They had like that one moment of excitement when they were, what was it, Monkey Squad, Banana Squad, whatever it was. And
Monkey Business, wasn't it?
Monkey Business. And it's just kind of been peter out there. What do we make of it, Sam?
Just speaking of Tanny, he's actually got me on a treasure hunt at the moment, a quest to find, I don't know, he found a watch on a Polish eBay type site, and I'm busy trying to get the watch for him, so there you go. Just fun things that I do in my non-existent spare time. Tanny's actually someone that I've known since Overwatch, so it's really cool to see, and of course he was the coach for Heretics for some time, and then just before Challenges 2, I want to say, or just after Challenges 2, when all of the crazy shuffle started happening and half of every team got dropped, he was part of that as well. So it's nice to see him get an opportunity on another team. I kind of echo Ryan's sentiments about DPS. There's a little bit of drama there, but also I can't remember when last I saw this guy play. That being said, I think that 80% of that problem comes down to no streams in Europe. I may have been able to see him more often if we'd had more streams. So yeah, that's the big question mark for me. And also the whole Overwatch thing, Tavik and Anko, I think there's a lot of potential there. But I'm gonna, once again, reserve most of my opinions until I actually get to see them in action, because very often a team will look good on paper and then they will fail.
Well,
miserably.
I guess we'll have to wait for July for the VCT cycle to kick back up for that one. We got another new roster to talk about. XL have finalized. They're bringing in Mo and Rubino, picking up. It feels like we're getting to the point in EU where, like, there's not a whole lot of new names being brought in. There are some in that OG roster, but it feels like everyone's figured out the, like, 20 players, and then they're just cycling through different iterations of them to figure out what's going to fit.
I just said it earlier, yeah.
It's getting kind of weird here. These are two players who have been competing. Rubino was part of Heretics. Mo was part of Fnatic, right? I'm not
Fnatic, yeah.
Fnatic, okay. And now they're coming on in. They're joining XL. David P is out. Biggie is also out. If you want to see a very good take on that, you should check out Mitchman's Twitter. I really enjoyed his take on that one. I won't repeat it here, but you know. What do we make of this new XL team, Sam?
I just find it hilarious because obviously David P was the very first player that was announced, and it was in that like really weird video where it almost felt like they were advertising boosting services. It was just the weirdest announcement video I'd ever seen. And there were a lot of questions around David P, similarly with the whole DPS thing, because there's a little controversy around him in Europe at the moment. I think it may have died down a little bit recently. But there has been previously a little bit of
he just talks a lot of shit, and he doesn't really
with nothing to back it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is just further proof that he can't back it up. He got picked up as the very first player to build a team, and he's one of the first players to get dropped. That should tell you pretty much all you need to know about that. The Biggie thing, Mitch's take covers it all, and I'm not gonna delve further into that, but I'm looking forward to seeing, because Rubino is a fantastic player. This is a huge pickup. One of our rumors last week was that it was going to be Vicious coming in, but I like this. I like that we went with Rubino, and I'm glad to see Mo getting a second chance. I was really sad when he got dropped from the Fnatic roster, so hopefully this gives XL a chance to actually do something.
Rubino and Mo, missing pieces here, Ryan?
Ooh, hard to say, really, because they both sort of play similar roles. I'm excited to see what Mo can do after being benched and dropped from Fnatic. He's still a young player, so I want to see him kind of rise to the occasion. I'm really excited to see Ali as well, I suppose, on that roster too. I really would have liked to have seen Ali and Vicious on the same team, but it sounds like Vicious is going to replace Draken for Guild, which is also like a pretty massive move. Rubino, it's hard to say because it's hard to work out who's going to play what, but Happy on the IGL is good, but Happy, much like David P and Biggie, also has a bit of a reputation for being a little bit toxic, a little bit hard to work with. So having him and Rubino on a roster, they both can be like pretty big on their ideas, I guess. So hopefully it's a less controversial XL that I wouldn't mind supporting because, yeah, the old team, not so much.
Not so much indeed. I will say, at least for Happy and Rubino, they've both been around competitive FPS for a long time. I'd imagine there's a great degree of familiarity between them, just in terms of knowing each other as people. So we'll see how that works in the team context. Now moving on to the next portion of our show, we've got some bans to talk about. Two fat bans laid down by Riot for very different reasons. The first one here, we're going to talk about it. It's Zelsis. Zelsis, the player for version 1, has been banned for the first run of this VCT cycle. That's VCT, the Challengers 1 qualifiers and Challengers 1 finals, which is pretty wild of a punishment coming in. He was suspended for basically integrity. He said something to an admin that violated a Riot rule. The Riot rule that they cited said it was something that was based around either gender or like racial discrimination.
That's tough.
Yeah,
that's just not a violation you throw around. So
honestly,
it's either
like
something.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna. It feels like it's either gonna be, knowing Riot, a small thing that's been blown out of proportion, something that was purely misunderstood, or certainly leaning towards Zelsis just saying something he shouldn't have done because we've already seen and heard rumors of how much of a pain in the ass he was for a lot of people when he was in Europe, playing in ranked, in scrims. Apparently, it kind of ties into that kind of narrative that he was being a bit of a dick during this. But it's hard to say. Like, again, this could be him just saying something that was probably something you shouldn't say, certainly in a actual tournament environment with people working for Riot in it. I don't know. It's either one or the other, so it's really hard to gauge where Zelsis comes off in this. And obviously, nobody's going to say this is what he said because, you know, they want to keep that kind of under wraps.
I really wish they would in this case. I really wish they would because he's getting shredded on Reddit and Twitter from people who have no clue or context, who are like, oh, well, I guess he's a racist. I guess he's a this. I guess he's a... And I'm pretty sure... Like, so I've known Jordan for a while, so I'm just gonna go ahead and preface that by that. I've known him through Counter-Strike, and you know, I've met the guy, I've hung out with the guy. Like, I've known him for a few years. I messaged him about this because I was genuinely curious. I think he was being dumb. I think he was an idiot. I think that fits Jordan, the Jordan that I know, the Zelsis that I know, is that he said something he shouldn't have and was an idiot about it. Do I think he said something genuinely like racist or offensive? No, that would really not fit the character that I know at all. I think he said something dumb to an admin that he shouldn't have said in a professional context, and I think Riot laid down the hammer on it. And I know that version 1 has basically decided that they're not going to fight this at all, that there's nothing to be gained from fighting it, which is absolutely the right call. Once Riot decides they're going to punish someone, they're going to punish someone, and there's pretty much nothing that can be gained from trying to fight it. But based on my understanding of the situation, this feels like a pretty strong reaction. Do you have any thoughts on this, Sam?
So... for me, the reason they're keeping it under wraps is one of two things. One, it really was a small thing, and they suspect that if it does get released, everyone's gonna go, "What? That was nothing. What?" Like, and then it turns into like a bigger thing than it needs to be. Or two, it really was bad, and they're trying not to get this kid cancelled for saying something really stupid. Like, it's one thing for people to speculate and be like, "Oh, he probably said a thing," but when you don't actually know what was said, it'll blow over. If people have some kind of actual proof where they can say, look, here's the screenshot where he said this thing to that person, therefore this is concrete proof that he is this kind of person, and therefore he should never play an FPS game ever again as long as he lives. Like, I feel like, I mean, this is kind of where we're headed in social media these days.
Yeah. I will say, I think it's the former, it's not the latter, based on my understanding. I think that if there were no baggage with, you know, dealing with Riot and figuring that out, honestly, probably Zelsis would rather just say what he said and be like, my bad. Because it's I could be wrong.
You know,
maybe something will come out that I'm wrong about this, but I mean, here's his response. I want to apologize to Riot for making an inappropriate remark. I would wager that this was written by the version 1 PR person. I take responsibility for my actions. We'll learn from this mistake. I'm sorry to my teammates for putting them in this position. We'll be taking a few days off social media. I will be better. He just said something dumb to an admin. It wasn't. If you're out there trying to form like a hate mob for Zelsis and trying to get him canceled, this ain't it. Wait until he does something even worse. It's something dumber. And
you make it sound like that's gonna happen.
I mean, look, I don't think it's gonna happen. But Jordan Zelsis, if you're watching this, you gotta button up, man. This is Riot. This is not a CS:GO LAN anymore. This is different. This is a very different environment.
Flashpoint.
Gotta button that up. You can't be
say,
tossing around the things you'd be saying in your pugs.
What I will say is that if it was that heinous and awful, version 1 don't go, well, we've accepted this and we're gonna have a sub for now and he'll come back and everything's gonna be Gucci. You know, they go, because of this, he is no longer on the team.
Yeah, right.
So
and
that, or
like staff in version 1 were responding to his apology, being like, "Little heart, you know, it's gonna be fine. This is not a big deal, from my understanding."
I almost feel bad for Riot though, because we've had 3 investigations, I suppose, from them NA wise. You've got the stuff with Frost, with delay in the game, finding the server. You've got this, and then you've got Sinatra. It's like a whole plethora of different positions that Riot have found themselves in. So yeah,
NA kind of wild, huh?
yeah, like I feel bad for them, and you know Zelsis personally, I don't, so it's not fair to speculate on what his demeanor's like. But yeah, context is important. Probably made a joke, and then I mean, I don't know if you know what he said or not. I have no idea, but yeah, I feel like it's good to give him the benefit of the doubt, because we don't see an awful lot of that on social media nowadays. It's always, he did this, all right, he's massive sexist and racist, we don't support that. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, I think in this instance he's just being a bit of a goober. And it was a stupid way to do it.
1.
Yes,
I just feel for version 1 because
they banned him for half of their opportunities to make Berlin. Like, that is such a punishment. They're not like, yeah, you miss one, like you can't play in one game. No, they banned him for a whole like event run. That's crazy harsh.
And on top of that, so they've just had to go through Masters with the sub.
Yeah.
Now they're gonna have to go, like, they haven't been a full 6-man. By the end of this, they will not have been a full 5-man since, like, before Masters for, like, 3 months, 4 months. I mean, this is just crazy. And my heart goes out to, that's why I'm wearing the cat ears today, man. Solidarity. I just feel for them.
I mean, look, Jammies is look. Emmy's got Jammies on speed dial right now. It's like, hey,
Yeah, but
so
Jammies is trialing for other teams.
yeah. Well, if any of those trials don't work out, we know where he's going for the next the next tournament cycle, and it'll be interesting to see who they bring as a sub. They'll obviously, presumably, have Whippy back, and we'll see who comes in for the next. Moving on from that one, because I think we've said what needs to be said on that. It is at this point just speculation, but I will say, be kind to people especially when you don't have all the information. Match fixing in my Valorant. I like this title you put in there. 2 players have been banned. Actually, 5 players have been banned, but 2 players have been banned for 36 months. Singaporean Valorant players for throwing a game back in September, I believe it was. Their players have received reduced sentences because they knew of the throw, they didn't actively participate in the throw. So it's kind of an interesting situation in that regard. But yeah, match fixing in our Valorant. What do we make of this, Sam?
I'm so disappointed. I knew it was gonna happen eventually. So what I gather from it was there were 2 players. One had the ideas, he was the brainchild, and one had the money. And then they took the idea to the rest of the team, and the team was like, "No mega lol, we don't want any part of this." But they didn't report it to Riot. So the 2 who were like the main instigators get the 36 months, and then the other 3, based on like how cooperative they were during the investigation, they got reduced sentences based on that, because they were still complicit, even if they weren't like a big, they weren't the brainchilds behind the whole thing. And it is very sad to see that this is still happening, and it's also incredibly stupid. I will never understand the thought process that goes through these morons' heads. Like, okay, maybe you get a payout now. Then what? You are literally screwed for so long. Is this payout really gonna, like, tide you over for the next 36 months, you clown? No! Oh, man, it hurts my head.
Ryan, what do you make of it?
Unfortunately, won't be the last time, especially for that region. Unfortunately, it runs right a little bit in Counter-Strike, and I imagine that would translate over to Valorant to an extent. It's more a case of just making sure that the punishments come out and you mitigate as much as possible, because people are always going to do that. It's just making sure that you get the right people, right? And there was a whole thing with Artis very early on because of his stuff in Counter-Strike. It's a tough one, but it won't be the last time we hear about teams doing this. But it's cool for Riot to be instantly on it with those punishments.
Yeah, no, it's good. And lay down severe bans, 3-year ban, pretty substantial for match fixing. But yeah, the Asian CS scene has had a lot of problems with this, and there's a lot of Sam, you're talking about like why someone would do it. There's actually, to my understanding, a fair amount of involvement from serious organized crime in match fixing for esports events in the Asian region, and applying severe pressure onto players, even if the players themselves aren't the originators of this. So it's a weird situation, a weird scene, but it's good for Riot to lay down the hammer as early and as often as they see it running, because if you weed it out early, you don't wind up with it taking root. Once it's taking root, it is very difficult. Moving on from that one, those bans just got dropped today. You can check out the Riot posting if you want more details on it. We have this nice title: Russia is weirder than EU. There was a Guns and Masters tournament played. It had double elim, but the lower bracket was played in Spike Rush. Got all kinds of weird. We're just going to touch on this quickly. It's just kind of a fun story of note here, Sam. But you want to talk about this tournament?
Yeah, this looks so much fun. So we talk about the wild stuff that goes on in EU. Well, Russia really had it. So there you go, double elimination bracket. The lower bracket was played on Spike Rush. Then, if you were eliminated, so you go through, like, you get dropped down to the lower, then you get eliminated, you could then sign up for what was called the wild card. The wild card was played in Escalation.
That's fantastic.
So the wild card grand final was Escalation. I saw the oh no, I've closed it. The comps, it was like 6 Razors versus 6 Jets or something equally stupid.
It's amazing. That's amazing.
Fun things.
I love it. I love it. Russia be wild. Would love to see it. I mean, we're going to get some crazy strats out of the CIS region as a result of these tournaments. Someone's going to be breaking out crazy util combos. Escalation at the next VCT cycle. I'm all for it. But let's move on. Let's move on into Recon Bolt, where we look at some of the things that are coming on up. We got an EMEA format update, a huge update for the region, for what this finals is going to look like, for what it's going to run into. So we've got double elimination for the first time ever. This is pretty wild. What do we think of it, Ryan?
I'm happy. I credit to Riot for being able to actually get this stuff done. It's been necessary for the longest time, but it's good for everything, right? We see more chances of games sort of coming in and all that, and basically go from that point. We'll just see the screen. There we go. So yeah, more chances for talent, hopefully, more broadcast days. The fact that we have invited teams as well, and actual teams making their way through the open qualifiers. It's a shame that we saw like HSD and Honk disband now, because there's a super strong chance that they could get into the close qualifiers part of it on the main broadcast this time more than previous events. So it's amazing, and I'm glad that we finally got to this point, because man, it's been a long road for EU, but we've got there in the end.
I am really curious to see how these invites work out. Obviously, there's your two teams that made it through to Iceland. That's obvious. That's easy. You just slot them in. But the next two, I feel like this is going to get kind of contentious, Sam. What do you make of it?
I don't know. So first up, I'm in two minds about the invites in general. I think in one sense it's good, because you're not going to have potential good talent getting knocked out in the round of 64 because they had the bad luck of running into FPX, you know? So there's like some potential for some of those teams to get a little bit further and possibly make their way in, because they're not going to be running into invited teams. At the same time, I feel like if you're good enough to be in that bracket, then you should be beating FPX, and therefore it doesn't matter that you've met them in the round of 64. And I have never been a fan of invites since like Ignition series way back in the day. I absolutely hate it. So I'd be curious to see. I mean, if they're using like VLR or Spike rankings, then the EU is screwed because those rankings.
I think I know who it'll be.
Okay.
Because
Go on, then.
surely they do it off VCT points so far. That makes the most sense.
That makes sense.
And there's, funnily enough, 8 teams that have VCT points on the board. So it would be, obviously, it would be Fnatic and Liquid. We'd see FPX. We would see Ascend. So that's 4. Guild, NIP, BDS, and Alliance would be the 8. If you're going off points. You might think Heretics, but because they changed their roster so much, they've lost all of their VCT points. They've gone from 70 back to 0. So that's likely to be the 8, but
And
it's
G2
hard to
don't have
gauge
that
it
problem
because
they never had points.
they never had points. So it makes sense for them to just make those massive roster moves, because it's a long game for Carlos, to be fair, and he's picked up a good roster. So yeah, that's more likely what it's going to be. So yeah, we still get to see like G2 and all those kind of teams make their run through, and also Heretics with this new roster as well.
I will say one thing I also noticed when I was reading through the new format is I think just the nature of having EMEA as opposed to like an EU qual and a CIS qual and a Turkey qual is when you're figuring out who gets how many slots in what event, it does seem to get very messy and very into the nitty-gritty, and I think that could be something that might need to be tweaked going forward. I would love to see CIS get their own VCT series at some point down the line. I think there's just a lot of talent in that region. I think that that's gonna become apparent, but we'll kind of see.
Did
you say is there?
Graphic.
Yeah, it's just not a region that's taken to the game yet, because
No.
CS is so massive in the CIS region, right? So it's
true.
going to be a slow one. Now V might be getting involved.
There was
apparently
there was a
picking
great
up Crow Crowd, which I'm buying all of the Navi merch if they pick up Crow Crowd, because I love that team. It's just a shame they didn't get Durka in time.
Yeah, that would be pretty awesome. I will say there was a tweet, speaking of how into CS, the CIS region is, there's a great tweet that was making the rounds that was like, I have so much respect for Russia, and it was like Google search percentage by population, comparing searches for CSGO and searches for Pornhub, and in the US it was like 99% for Pornhub and 1% for CSGO, and in Russia it was like 63% for CSGO. And it's just like, yes, the region is strong.
Grief.
The region is strong. And Is good to see. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see this next EMEA cycle, obviously with shifting rosters. I mean, a ton of new rosters coming in a cycle could get kind of weird. Speaking of which, I think we've got a clip here from Average Jonas, who was on the Loosely Scripted podcast, a new podcast. Well, actually, an old podcast that's been revived by Mitch Reams, a Nerd Street Gamers podcast, which you can find on Spotify by searching for Loosely Scripted. There was a 38-minute interview. We've got 2 minutes here to play. Are we ready to roll that? Roll the clip? I've always wanted to say that on a show. Roll the clip.
From Europe that maybe our NA audience isn't as familiar with, that you think we should be watching out for, and is a dark horse to getting one of those 4 slots that Europe, Middle East, and Africa get in Berlin?
I mean, so the thing here is that there was recently a big shuffle on 3 of the teams. G2, Heretics, and Ascend switched around their players a lot. So we don't actually know the actual level of any of these teams, because they all switched players and they all feel like they had the better end. And like, obviously some of them have to, I mean, it would be insane if all of them had the better end.
Someone has to be wrong.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't actually know yet, but we know that, like, for instance, CNED is one of the best Jet players in the world. Like, he does absolutely nutty things with Jet, especially with the operator. And like, one of the reasons why Ascend won a lot of their matches earlier was like partially because people didn't find a way to stop him. Like, you can't just dry peek angles if he's holding there with the operator. He will punish you for it 10 out of 10 times. So it's really hard for me to say who's like the dark horse right now, to be honest, but I'm really excited to see the new G2, if anything, because like G2 is a big organization, and like it's an organization that have a lot of money, and they have a crazy CEO. Carlos is I fucking love him, but he's a good friend of mine, so like he doesn't mind, but he's something else. He doesn't care to get his hands dirty if that can make his team better. And that's like, esports needs these kind of CEOs and these kind of teams again to create narratives, because G2 is now currently the bad boys of Europe, right? And then Liquid and Fnatic are the good guys. You know, they're the good guys that, like, it's like the station wagon and the dog. It's like the guy you marry. And then G2 is like the leather jackets guy who will break her heart, but he's probably good in bed, you know?
Is there a dark...
Oh, here we go. So do we think G2 is going to be good in bed? Do we think that these all these roster shuffles, that this is going to be the end result? I think his point that somebody is going to be wrong is a very valid one, in terms of, like, we're not picking up new talent. We're just recycling these pieces and seeing if this configuration works out, redoing the chessboard, if you will. Somebody's going to be left holding the bag here. Who do you think is gonna win this exchange here, Ryan?
Ascend are doing really well, is what I keep hearing. We actually get to see a look at them as well, because they're playing in the LVP tournament, and they look really good. Zeke looks really good on that team. Regardless of how well Heretics do over the next couple of months, even, I think that they're the biggest loser, because they were the team that won First Strike and came second in stage 1. And then, unfortunately, because their players wanted to go to G2 and Avova and Nuki, and Pora wanted to set up that super team in Turkey, you lose all those points and you have to start again. And that isn't a team that you can just build a roster with. You don't have the resources like G2 or whatever. It's a team that just found themselves with the right players, and now they've lost that spark. It's going to be really difficult, or Lightning will have to strike twice for that to happen again, I think. Even though I think Ardis and Patitek are exceptional players, and the pickups of Valorante and Magnum, Monster even, are really good too, but it's just not as good as the other 2 teams, I don't think.
It's going to be kind of tough for them. What do you make of it, Sam?
I worry about the lack of EU tournaments. Not just because, like, I miss tournaments and I want to watch them and cast them and stuff, but because we all know how valuable scrim bucks are. Like, it doesn't matter how you're doing in scrims, to be perfectly honest. It might give you the smallest inkling of how a team will perform on an official, but it doesn't really tell you much. I miss having officials, because not every team is participating in things like the LVP, and we don't see tournaments that have the bigger teams participating. so they don't really get to practice each other in a more formal environment. And I think that that's somewhat detrimental. I mean, I know shortly after the G2 roster was announced, I don't know how long they'd been together, but I would imagine a fair while before the actual announcement came out. But they lost to a team called Team Finest. And if you're busy going who mega lol, I mean, there's a reason for that. If you are not completely involved in the EU scene, you will not know who this team is because they don't have massive accolades, that kind of tally up for 6 pages on Wikipedia and VLR. They've been kind of a barely middle of the pack team for quite some time. So that doesn't bode well for G2. But is that purely because G2 aren't very good, or is that because they're relying purely on scrims and they haven't actually had an opportunity to play in more formal settings? I feel like EU has a massive disadvantage in that regard.
Following on that point as well, I mean, it's an opportunity to find new talent, right? When you have these open tournaments. I mean, we look at some of the signings that we've had in the U.S., like Koala Noob traveling for Ghost. Without Nerd Street Gamer tournaments, no one would know who the heck Koala Noob is, right? Like that's how you show up as new talent, so that's how you start to bring that talent up, as opposed to cycling the same 15 players who have been on the top teams for a while and seeing if this configuration works, because it's such a risk to pick up an unknown name if you really haven't seen them compete. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Moving on, looking forward, we've got the Game Changers Quals this weekend, and then the next weekend we got the Game Changers event. We've already talked about it a little bit with the Shopify Rebellion pickup, but there is some exciting shakeups going on in the North American women's scene, and I think that this is going to be a really interesting tournament. I put down a couple of news that I wanted to talk about. We've got the new women's teams. We've got a Cloud9 White team that there are still some question marks about from their last cycle. Maybe there's some weakness there. And we've also just had the teams that got signed right before the last Game Changers event who've actually had time together while being signed, as opposed to being signed like the week of the tournament. How do we think this scene's going to shake up? What do we think this tournament's going to look like? How are you feeling about it, Sam?
I'm so excited. The women's Valorant scene is my favorite part of the Valorant scene right now. And it's purely because I feel like the growth that we see in that scene is so much more than what we're seeing in the male scene. Not for any reason other than we're finally getting support. So now that the women have this support, they're able to flourish. And we see them improve from tournament to tournament to tournament. C9, yes, they have historically for the last almost a year, if you think back to like the Ignition series, the FTW, which I believe was in September of last year, so we're almost at a year now. They've been at the top. They've been unstoppable. And that was before Casey was on the team. That was back when it was just Jazzykins being absolutely insane. Now, of course, they've had kind of the shuffles, and all the other teams have started to catch up a little bit. We've got CLG, who have seriously been looking on point. We've got Moon Raccoons, who just got picked up by Shopify. We've got the new team with Arianicus and Lunacats. I forget the name, but they're also looking amazing. We've got Man I Love Fwogs, who have been doing so much work in like I don't know if you could call a tier 2 scene for the women's scene just yet, but they're another like up and coming name, and of course their branding is so good, everybody loves them, everybody's just behind them all the time. And I'm looking forward to this, honestly. I don't know if I love MILFs, I'll be honest. Kind of on the fence about MILFs. But I'm not on the fence about women's Valorant. This is so exciting. This weekend is going to be insane, and your girl's on mic. That's right.
Hey, there we go. There we go. There's the announcement. Sam going to be doing all the Game Changers action. We do love to see that. Ryan, how are you feeling about the event?
Yeah, good. I mean, from casting the first one, it was hard to really gauge the scene, and it was really hard to get invested in it as well, because there was just so many new orgs coming in, so many teams that we didn't know about before. Now some of those teams have been signed. Now we have a really interesting narrative of, is Cloud9 White still the best women's team in the scene? Have other teams caught up to them with TSM putting more resources into it? Gen G picking up a lineup? There's some real buzz about it now. And now that we're starting to get a bit more of a circuit with these teams, and that's only going to continue to go forward and forward with more regular events, at least that's from the sounds of it. And with any luck, that's what happens. I'm genuinely excited to sort of follow along for this event and to see how they do. And usually as well, you're kind of clashing with VCT a little bit, so there's going to be a lot of like looking at different regions and stuff. So because of that, people might not pay that much attention to the female scene just because there's so much Valorant going on that they have to kind of drop a couple of regions. But this, just before VCT starts up again, I think people are really excited to see some competitive Valorant. So it's the perfect time for it to come in. So yeah, I'm genuinely excited, and I hope we see somebody overthrow the queens, not the kings of Cloud9 White.
It would be really interesting to see a shake-up. I always describe them as the high watermark that's been set, and everyone else is trying to reach that. And so we'll see how close people have gotten, or if they've even surpassed it. It's going to be very exciting in that regard. We've also got a little bit of an update on the NSG Summer Champs run. We just had a weekly tournament. The monthly June tournament is coming up in just a moment. We've got teams qualified through. We've got 4 teams qualified through to Summer Champs just purely on their tournament placings in the monthlies. And we've also got the bracket. So we're just going to pull that up. We're going to show you the standings here in terms of tournament points that we've got going on. And just take a little peek at this. This is the last tournament. This is the tournament that literally concluded last night. I was tuning in for a little bit of it. Got to catch a bit of the games. But we did have the Sonics win it. Sonics won the tournament up against Renegades as the runners-up. I got to watch a fair chunk of that Renegades Ghost Gaming game, and that was a lot of fun. What do we make of this weekly here, Sam?
I love seeing that Sonics are coming out on top. I mean, it's always been kind of neck and neck between Sonics and Renegades since like when Sonics first entered, right? And Renegades has been the top of the quote-unquote tier 2 level for quite some time. They've been dominating every single one of these weekly events, despite the fact that they don't even need to. Of course, after winning the April monthly, they secured their spot in the Summer Champs, but of course the more points you have, the better seeding you have, so they just keep coming and they keep steamrolling. And it's a similar thing for Sonics, who have also competed, but I see we don't see like Rise or Complexity because they've also qualified, so you know, gentleman's agreement, they will not be yoinking points from everyone.
Well,
I
they
think
might
the thing that
say
makes me
that.
the most
Sonics and Renegades are in every tournament. Their
Yeah.
circuit points are like through the roof. Quick shout out to Virtuoso. They're making big strides, and this is team. And yeah, like
Friend of the show.
I saw it on Reddit where people sort of saying that they'd like to see some of the teams that have made roster moves, like the likes of even like Gen G and Immortals, to be part of this kind of tournament. Because remember LG, remember Exet with all of the Winter Championship and Philadelphia tournaments that they played, and like the Pittsburgh Knights tournaments. They got to a point where they were a tier 1 team from just grinding all of these third-party events. So this one, I think the big dogs shouldn't, look over it because it's a small-time thing. Like TSM being like, oh, we're only going to play in the big Valorant Champions Tour stuff. They could do a lot of work with winning and playing in tournaments like this.
They're not allowed.
not?
Oh yeah,
They made it to a Challengers event, right? A Challengers Close qualifier. You're not allowed.
But there's
to
still a
compete in
lot
this.
of Is it just Challengers events?
I believe once you've made it to a Challengers Close qualifier, or what the line is, maybe I think it's once you've qualified to a Challengers Close qualifier, you can't compete in these for like one VCT cycle. I think the way it works. But yeah, you can't compete in this. So if you want to see Gen G, too bad. They literally can't enter it, is my understanding.
too good.
Too good.
I mean, it's good to see Sonics and Renegades taking the most of that opportunity then and just playing in it. I disagree with the whole, all right, we're qualified, we don't need to play it anymore. Like, keep playing it. It's time and officials. It's time on Breeze. Could be time with a new agent at this point. It comes in real handy.
Except Breeze is not being played. I've seen the observers
Oh my
complaining
God.
about it yesterday. They're so sad. All the observers just want to observe Breeze, and all the casters just want to cast Breeze, and all the teams are like, nah.
I'm getting it in
Oh,
ancient
next
right
stream,
now.
I'm going to
CS.
have words.
No one will
I'll
play
be
it.
having words.
But I know that my brain just broke for a moment. I think Complexity might wind up competing in these tournaments again. I know that a couple of their players were actively moving last week, so I think that may have just been like, we can't do this one type of situation, scheduling conflict. I'd imagine a similar situation might have been occurring for Rise. Look, it's a tournament, right? You don't have that many opportunities to compete. Go run some prize pool. Go raise your standing in the scene. It's a good thing to do. I think they're trying to play in officials every time that they can. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up. Well, we do have one last thing to show. Do we have the circuit points graphic? Did we already look at that? We were just looking at the bracket, right? I'm not crazy.
Yeah, we haven't seen the points
If
yet.
we
got
don't, I can read them out for you.
I think we've got the cumulative points ready to go here. If we can pull those up, take a little peeky poo.
Oh, we do not.
We do not.
don't?
Never mind. Read them out.
All right,
Who's in
let
the
me
lead?
read them out. Let me read them out. Let me read them out in like a footballing So we got Renegades, 5,350 points. Sonics,
Doesn't matter, they're already qualified.
2,500.
Also already
Complexity,
qualified.
1,700.
Already
Right,
qualified.
1,650.
Already
Built by
qualified.
Gamers, 1,300. Uka's,
First one.
1,300.
Okay.
Goofy Goobers, 1,150. Saw, 1,150. Kooky Koalas, 900 points. 870 Team Basilisk. FPLC, Virtuoso, Noble, Some to Prove, Pittsburgh Knights, Resonates, so on and so forth. They're the teams that are in the green right now, with Team Seam, Brimstone Gaming, Insight, never heard of any of those teams, and Evil Geniuses, I've heard of them, in potential qualifying positions.
Oh, poor Evil Geniuses.
I've been hearing about Teal Seam a lot recently, and I know they just picked up a player. I cannot for the life of me remember who it was, but it was someone that it was a name that I recognized, so this was interesting.
Taiti, wasn't it?
Taiti, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yes, that's him. Yeah, they just picked him up, so might see some interesting stuff there. Also, go Virtuoso. I need Virtuoso flags.
There we go. I mean, they should be in decent position to actually qualify through. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes up, to see who's going to make it through to Summer Champs. We do have the June Monthly, so that's 2 more teams who are going to be able to direct qualify through to the event by winning the June Monthly. But I think that is the last 2 teams that'll get direct tournament invite, and then everything else comes from circuit points. So it's going to be really interesting to see where that shakes up. That's something to keep an eye on. That is going to wrap up our show here, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to Press 4 to Defuse this week. We've been a little bit later, but, we're sorting things out with the studio as always. We'll generally strive to start at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday, so be sure to tune in again if you enjoyed the show. Well, our episodes are also up on YouTube after the fact if you want to check it out, if you missed some of the information.
And Spotify.
And are we on Spotify? That's awesome. I didn't even realize
We are
that.
on Spotify.
And on Spotify.
Yeah.
Gonna have to check that out myself. Be sure to follow these 2 lovely people at their ads down below their faces for all the Valorant details. You're gonna want to follow Sam, especially since she's casting this weekend. Ryan, I guess you're all right too. Ryan's got some sick episode YouTube content that's gonna be coming out with the new patches, with the new episode coming through. So be sure to follow him on Hitscan on the YouTubes. Follow us here. Follow Nerd Street Gamers, twitter.com/NerdStreetGamers, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
They can do is just run right at it. Boombot, main shells, flashpoint, frenzy, knees.
Not the second, get shuts down. So it's a 1v2 clutch, but Chase has one. It's a winnable situation. And
Want you to do it, it's Dizzy instead with the Marshall to find one, make it a second. Sniper will fall, and it's just pistols. It's just a Marshall trying to do anything here possible with the blades. A couple go wide. There's the resets, though. 2 quick kills. Cut it down to a 2v2. The dash into U-Haul, but they're running out of time. They have to get it done right here, right now in a 1v2 chase. What can you get done? It's not.
Crunchy's fine. Yep, gonna find the shot on the sniper. Lynn's up top. Crunchy ready for it. Could be able to find this one as well. Lynn goes low.
No longer on the Rays, now on the Phoenix. Third ball out through, spots out 4, able to take down 1, 2, 3, looking for 4. Nets, Crunchy, another, no way, Dizzy hits that Retro low on health, only 24 with the daggers in hand, goes full send, but Sonics will close it out in dominant